Good afternoon, everyone. We have quite a full house today. Welcome to join us on this beautiful spring afternoon to the Digital Food Series 2023. Today we have a very exciting case presented by Frederik Claassen about the Solidaridad, about the fair data policy or the project, and the relation to the overall sustainability drive with the EU reporting, CSRD reporting. So to start, I'd like to introduce myself and our digital food team. My name is Tiffany Tsui. I am the host of this digital food series. We started in 2020 with a team from Foodlog, that is Dick Veerman, can wave, and also Bianca, and also Anushka. So we started the digital food series to focus on the theme of connecting. So connecting data, technology, and strategy, and connecting people, ideas, and regions. Myself, I'm a sustainability strategist, consultant, entrepreneur. Other than co-hosting the digital food platform, I'm also the managing partner at the Vertical Farm Institute, which we focus on developing sustainable ultra short chain solutions. So with our user cases since 2022, we want to answer the key question is how to unlock the true value of sustainability with data and digital transformation. So today's topic also comes at a very relevant time, or let's say a very fitting time. The IPCC report, I don't know if everyone have read about it or heard about it. The latest study of IPCC just released gives quite a dire warning about the state of our global warming. So let's start with a poll question on that subject, Anushka. So the question is, the latest finding from the IPCC report says that we have, as mankind, the last chance to adopt deep cut in all sectors around the globe. So in order to reduce our emissions by half, in order to remain this 1.5 degree scenario. So as practitioners, concerned citizens, what is your opinion about this latest status? So optimistic, you believe that there's enough actions already ongoing that we will meet this target, that we'll act together for once. Pessimistic, that we will just have to adapt to a more drastic weather conditions which you already see, and rising sea level. And lastly, of course, we're also open to that you don't believe this climate crisis. So let's, Frederik, let's come to you. You are a sustainability strategist, banker, economist. You specialize in impact investment. So moving, let's say, the big money to achieve the society goals. So what is your view about this, our climate change, global warming prospect?
Well, thank you, Tiffany, and thank you also for the invite to participate and present something about the Fair Data Initiative. Yeah, I'm afraid I'm a bit pessimistic about this, and that has to do with global politics. There's a lot of polarization in this world. So I do not believe that we will act in the sense of a common interest on this matter. I hope we can manage the consequences of it. I think we can, but it will be quite devastating for a large part of the global population, I'm afraid.
Yes, also in terms of the cost. So we also know that a large portion of the consequences from these drastic changes will be borne by, let's say, the lower income populations relating to climate risk, lowered yield, natural disasters. And at Solidaridad, your goal is to improve the livelihood of poor farmers or the smallholder farmers, which is our topic today. So I'm a little bit surprised that you will be openly about you are pessimistic about it, because I must say you should be hoping with a project like what you're working on that you should, well, you would aim to improve this the livelihood of farmers, right?
Yeah, but when I would be very optimistic, then I wouldn't have a job, right? So
Okay.
that's why I'm also pessimistic. No, pessimistic or realistic. I mean, I find the whole climate debate very complex. There are a lot of research papers, and they shy away from the actual solutions, which is planting trees. Very simple, you know, decreasing emissions. Not that simple, but doable. And we have all the technology in our hands, and it's all about human will to actually solve the problem. And there's the issue. It's in the behavior and in the global politics.
Okay, so please let's start also with your presentation. Tell us what are you doing to be both realistic, but also contributing to achieving this, let's say, global public interest. But let's let Anoushka, let's tap into temperature of today's audience. What is the result of the poll question, Anoushka? Okay, wow. So nobody disbelieves it. So, but most of our audience shares the same sentiment that we are rather pessimistic. But let's hope we are all still keep on working on despite the pessimism. So Frederick, please start.
Thank you very much, Tiffany. I will share my screen because I prepared a presentation, and just let me know, Tiffany, when you can see the screen, because then I can start the presentation. Good. Welcome, everybody. My name is Frederick Claassen. My current position within Solidaridad is the head of strategy and policy for the Solidaridad network. And Solidaridad network cares about 200 million. So why do we care? Well, first of all, I need to explain what 200 million means. 200 million is a part of 500 million smallholders that are actually producing all the things that we eat. So smallholders are very small farmers that are actually working on a very small area, let's say between 2 and 5 hectares. That's a smallholder. And these 200 million smallholders are part of what we call the 8 major commodity chains. So the 8 major commodity chains, I will show you 6 of these chains. You can think about cocoa, palm oil, cotton, tea, coffee, and sugarcane, but also about soy and a couple of other commodities. But I show you this slide to actually tell you that these smallholders actually matter. So when you look at cocoa, we talk about 5 million small-scale farmers, but they produce 75% of the total cocoa volume. So the bar that you see in your shop, or the things that you eat that contain cocoa, most of that cocoa is being produced by smallholders. You see the same for tea and for coffee, 70%. So what I'm trying to explain here is that smallholders, small farmers really matter in getting our food on our plate. They are an essential part of the supply chains. But the problem is they are scattered all over the place. They are not that well organized. They are very poor. They don't have access to internet, to IT. And that means they are not that easy to include in the commodity supply chains where the big brands are working on. And that's the next slide that I show you, how they fit into the supply chain, the global supply chains. And that what you automatically see is the imbalance of power, or the balance of power. It depends how you look at it. Here you see that 200 million small-scale farmers, they produce for only 25 agriculture commodity traders. And those traders, they move the produce to 25, around 25 first-moving consumer goods providers, and then to 25 retailers. And then at the end of the supply chain to a lot of people who actually get the food on their plate. And that means that they are tied in a supply chain where the balance of power is often in the hands of the traders, the retailers, the brands. And that has a big influence on price setting, on volumes, on quality, and also on dictating the requirements for access to market. And those requirements become very tight. And that's a bit the negative part of something that is really positive. Let me explain that to you. First of all, we care for 200 million or even more smallholders as Solidaridad, and we do that in 44 countries. And we work with about 1,000 plus staff members across the world. We are one of the biggest global CSOs, civil society organizations that cares about smallholder farmers. We have an annual budget of around 85 million euros to spend. And we raise that money in our northern regions, which is North America and Europe. And we spend that money in our what we call southern or the implementing regions, which is Latin America, East and West and Central Africa, and Asia, as you can see. I talked about the balance of power, and I will explain a little bit about how we are trying to influence the sustainability debate during the more than 50 years that we work on sustainable food commodity chains and smallholder situation in it. Here you see a pyramid, and on the top of the pyramid is our starting point. So we started at the time with introducing fair trade as a label, a voluntary sustainability label. But also Max Havelaar is something that we introduced. We were part of UTZ-KP, which is now Rainforest Alliance. So we actually were working on 3 voluntary sustainability standards because we believed at that time, ladies and gentlemen, that the consumers would make the difference. So if we put a label on a specific food product, then the consumer would choose for that label because we thought that they were the ones that made the choices. But that was not really true. So after a couple of years, we switched our agenda a little bit to start engaging more with the companies because we analyzed that the companies played a very important role here. And that has to do with that balance of power, as I showed you in that specific slide. 25 companies actually imposing all kinds of requirements on 200 million small-scale farmers. Corporate social responsibility at the time, and it was the next level of our involvement, was what we saw as the solution. So we started to work with the CSR departments of all kinds of big corporate institutes. We had strategic partnerships with the Syngentas, with the Unilevers, with the Cargills, with quite a lot of companies. And we worked on what we call public-private partnerships, where we actually started to work together to actually achieve common sustainability goals in terms of farmers with improved livelihood or commodity chains with more sustainable elements in it. Now, from there on, we realized that these individual projects, public-private partnerships, were very hard to scale because every time you need donor money to start a new project. So project-wise scaling is always difficult. And that's why we entered into the 3rd phase of our development. And that was that we started to work on sector initiatives. So we thought that the combination between consumers, companies, and sectors would actually create a change. And that was the time that we started to set up, together with other NGOs and civil society organizations, roundtables like RSPO, Roundtable for Sustainable Palm Oil, or the RTRS on soy, and a couple of other roundtables that were actually looking at sustainability issues or aligning on sustainability issues in specific commodity sectors. So that was the 3rd phase of our development. And still we were not satisfied, Tiffany, I have to say that to you. So we really start to analyze the whole situation, and we thought, okay, the next phase must be mandatory, because if you compare the first 3 layers with the final layer on the bottom, there's one difference here, and that is the final layer, the base of this pyramid, is mandatory regulations. And that's exactly what we're coming out now for this presentation, mandatory regulations from the European Union on sustainability reporting. We're entering what we think an area where mandatory regulation will be more visible, will be more guiding, and that we move a little bit away from the voluntary approach, and that we're actually looking for a smart mix between voluntary initiatives and mandatory initiatives. And that's where we are now. And that's why I show you this pyramid of change. because I want to explain to you the new area that we are entering. And that also explains a bit about my pessimism, Tiffany, because the whole voluntary approach that we have been doing with climate change, at the end of the road, we come to the conclusion that we have to come to mandatory regulations to actually speed up the whole climate change agenda. And that's my pessimism. But perhaps, if we all apply to the same mandatory regulations, then we will regain speed and we will solve the whole issue. But mandatory regulations are much needed. Now, and here comes the problem. You would say, actually, Solidarity, you should be happy, that the government is imposing mandatory regulations, right? Should be really happy that we have regulations now for import on sustainable cocoa or whatever. But the downside here is data, because it is data that you need to actually do the due diligence on all those commodities that we are importing here in our markets. If we don't get the data, we're not going to do the due diligence. We can't import it. Now, you can imagine that there is a small group of farmers that can easily provide that data because they're connected to the internet. They have devices in their hands. So they can actually be part of that supply chain and have a very efficient way of due diligence. But most of these farmers don't have that access to the internet. So this trend, although it is a positive one, can cause less inclusiveness in supply chains. And that's also why I showed you this overview, how important smallholders are. Remember, 70% for the coffee production, 70% for the tea production, 75% for cocoa production. If the majority of these smallholders can't comply with due diligence, then we have a problem, because then we can't import the cocoa. So that's why becoming part of the data ecosystem and economy is a dire necessity. And it's actually becoming a license to operate. Tiffany, perhaps it's now time for the next question.
Yes, let's move to, on that note, when you introduce this mandatory requirements, let's also see what our participants today are involved in this, or they are informed of this new requirement at the EU level. Anushka, please, the second poll question. The question is, are you or your organization working on or involved in the new CSRD requirements in sustainability reporting, and how? So several choices, whether you are one of the 550,000 large or listed corporations falling under this requirement, which means you have to start reporting by 2025. Secondly, whether you are as a consultant or data providers or suppliers, or are you as civil society organizations providing oversight and feedback from the consumer side, or as policymakers, or have you not been, sorry, the last question, I'm not familiar with CSRD, so that's your choices. Frederick, what is your answer to this question? How do you see your role in the preparing the CSRD?
Well, we don't have a direct role in it because we're not a company, but what our role is to make sure that it does not lead to exclusive commodity supply chains, so that our farmers can still meet the requirements that are set by this regulation. That's our most important strategic goal.
Because in this poll question, there is mentioning several roles as consultants, data providers, as suppliers, because you're not suppliers for sure, or as standard setters, or as the oversight organization, so public interest oversight body. How do you see Solidaridad in this new role you're describing? As you mentioned, the government, let's say, as a voluntary organization, in some ways, your job is kind of done, because let's say the advocacy you promoted to become a public interest, now it has been adopted by the highest level government as mandatory requirements. So do you see a transition of your role in this, in working with, when there's already voluntary standard, do you see your role becoming more of a data provider or oversight, or you're also part of the standard setting body still?
Yeah, it's a diverse role, I think, that we have. We do different things. So the first thing that we do is that we are heavily involved now in advocacy and then towards the European Commission to make sure that the policies that they issue are meeting the requirements of our farmers and that they still can be part of these supply chains. We realize that when they want to be part of those supply chains, we have to make sure that we onboard those farmers to the data ecosystem so that they can comply and work with due diligence regulations and measurements and compliance. So I think that's the second part. We continue to work with our farmers to improve their livelihood. So that means that we teach them how to apply good agriculture practices. We will make sure that they are connected to market. We will make sure that they are connected to input providers so that they can really run and build and professionalize their business. And also we are still involved in voluntary standards setting and developing voluntary standards. We do believe in a smart mix between mandatory standards and voluntary standards. And that's actually the areas that we are currently working on.
Okay, great. So we can move on to the second part with Anushka showing us what our participants today are involved in. We show the poll result. Yeah. Actually, 1/3 of our audience are not, so that should be really, I'm not familiar with the reporting. So that really comes to good in your next presentation to explain us what does it mean, this EU requirement, this voluntary and the mandatory and voluntary. How does this hybrid look like? The floor is yours.
Yes, I will talk more about the data ecosystem and the data economy. And I can only say to those that are not familiar, make yourself familiar. You know, there's a good website. You already shared that link in the announcement, I believe. And there you can see that, the bigger companies, they have to report on specific sustainability related indicators. And as a company, you want to make sure that that reporting doesn't cost so much money. Actually, you meet the requirement, you do it as efficient as possible. And that means that when you do it as efficient as possible, you will refer to data-driven compliance mechanisms, because that's the most efficient way. And that makes that puts us in a position and an urgency that we want to actually work on making sure that as much as farmers become part of this data ecosystem, Tiffany. That's really important for us. And we're not pushing them into it, we want to pull them into it. And that's really a difference in approach. Pushing them into it would mean that we will actually not ask them to participate, but force them to participate, because otherwise they will lose their business. What we do is we actually develop what we call first mile applications. First mile refers to actually the first mile in the field. Very close to the farmer, we develop applications, IT applications that they can use for sharing their data, but also benefiting from sharing their data. Because we think that if a farmer wants to be part or will be part of a data ecosystem, he or she must benefit from sharing data and not being forced by sharing data. And later on in the presentation, I will show you a couple of examples. But what is more appealing, ladies and gentlemen, than the business case? I mean, if there's anywhere a farmer can make money, a farmer will certainly do that. So we currently have developed or are developing a couple of different business cases where the farmer is actually in the center of that business case, reaping the benefits of it. So it could be a business case where you track and trace produce through the supply chain, where you improve product quality, where you actually connect farmers to a transaction platform, where you actually are going to improve the quantity, the traded quantity through a digital platform. And that's a business case not only for the farmer, but also for an off-taker. But also if you label that produce that you tracked and traced through the supply chain, and that's also what we're currently doing, verification, labeling of that produce. For brands, that could be very interesting because they will have a label on the produce that is being actually pushed through the digital platforms that we actually offer to our farmers. You also can think about food safety kind related business cases, But also access to finance is an important one. We collect data from smallholders to actually calculate credit profiles. Credit profiles give a good insight into credit risk. It makes it easier for an MFI, a microfinance organization, to actually lend out money to farmers that they don't know, to make selections, which farmer is bankable and which farmer is not bankable. But we also work with input providers, connecting them to the farmers, offering applications where farmers can actually have a better view on what kind of fertilizers that they have to use, how many should they use, the pesticides, crop protection. It's not a business case only for input providers, but also for farmers. We also have applications that are geared towards collecting data related to emissions. That's an interesting business case for insetters, for carbon mitigation and adaptation programs and projects. And now we'll talk a little bit about that later on and give you a couple of examples for that. So the starting point to pull a farmer into the data ecosystem is by developing a business case for a farmer that is appealing enough for him or her to join. Now, during that road, strategic pathway, we encounter quite a lot of challenges, which I show you here. It requires us to really think about, here we go to the left of the slide, an open farmer digital identity. So we have to work with the same kind of identities that we link to our farmers to make sure that the applications that we are developing are interoperable, to make sure that the data that these applications collect are well structured in our databases. Building on that farmer identity, we start providing services, which is the second block in this slide. And it can be all kinds of different applications. And I will show you a couple of videos to explain to you what kind of application you think about. But they can actually interact to communicate with farmers directly, for example, through an IVR or SMS-based technology, what we do in the cocoa production in Ghana, but also through an extension officer that has a smartphone or a lead farmer. I will show you an example of how we do that, which is extension solutions. But we also have online farm diaries on application where farmers can directly link with our platforms and actually, start building, data and all kind of information that we can use to offer service to them. So this is a direct relationship. And we have specific applications for cattle, for tea, for all kinds of commodities. But these in the second block are our applications that we deploy in the field. Now, from there, we go to data transformation, warehousing, and blockchaining. So we have a regional platform that actually capture and collect all that data and where we do the analysis. And we use the analysis to improve our services, but also to actually fuel our advocacy agendas. Because you can imagine if we get proof of concepts, proof of evidence, what happens in the field, we can use that data for advocacy purposes. In the direction of the European Commission, for example, we use that data. Now, from the data analysis, our platforms also facilitate all kinds of transactions. So we have platforms that facilitate the transactions of produce, like farmer to market, but also the SolidCloud platform that I will show you later on in the presentation will offer some tools that farmers can actually use to make transactions in the produce that they're producing. Now, the fifth one on the right one is more the policy kind of part. So this is about data sharing and monetization, as well as how do we formulate the policies that apply to data sharing. And those are the fair data policies and the fair data principles, which are two for Solidaridad. One is farmers should benefit from sharing data, and the second one is farmers own the data that they share. Those are the two most important principles, and we call that fair farm data. This is a typical India sheet. I like it so much because it's so colorful and it's so different from all the sheets that you see now here. But this is the SolidCloud that our team in Bangalore has developed. And the SolidCloud is a platform that actually connects different devices to that platform. It has, for example, a soil tool where you can actually in 10 seconds get an idea about the quality of your soil. We have developed a drone where you can actually get a good view of your plot, but also of the status of your produce, when to harvest, when not to harvest. We have weather stations that are connected to this platform. We have solid trace that will actually track and trace produce and make sure that there is verification of produce across the whole supply chain. That's solid trace. We have Solifarm, which actually gives the farmer all kind of information he or she needs to make sure that the volume that he or she produces increases and the quality gets better. So what you see here is one platform with different applications. Some of them are already launched. I think those are the blue ones. The green ones are ready to launch, and the purple ones are planned to launch. And this whole platform, we just got a prize award in India of one of the most promising technical, innovative companies on this in this sector, and we won that with this idea. People like it very much, and our farmers in the field can actually use it. And that's what I will show you now. And we'll optimize for video. That means that I can't see you. So if there's an issue with the video, please shout or tell me, give me a call, do anything. I can't see you, but you can see the video.
Meet Ratan Roy, second generation tea farmer who owns a tea garden over 1.5 acres of land. Ratan is one of the many small tea growers in India who collectively contribute more than 50% to India's tea production. However, they encounter a variety of challenges. Despite high yields, Ratan faces low production scale, lacks awareness of the supply chain, and receives less than 3% of the tea's retail price. His lack of technical knowledge leads to inefficient fertilizer and pesticide use, affecting crop quality. Climate change has further reduced production rates. Small farmers like Ratan need long-term help so that they can use the best farming techniques to make high-quality, high-value teas for their sustenance. Introducing Trinity, a joint initiative by Indian Tea Association and Solidaridad, along with 7 associations of small tea growers that aims to sustainably transform the small tea grower segment in India. It works through 5 pillars. It empowers small tea growers to improve yield, gain better pricing, increase their access to market and finance, reduce climate-related losses, and improve community governance. Trinity, complaint factories process tea leaves from small producers in their vicinity, thus avoiding time lag and acquiring the garden fresh benefit. Trinity helps businesses accomplish sustainability goals. For consumers, it helps trace tea from gardens to retail shelves. They learn from producers about their safety and quality standards. Using digital technology and innovation, we have a 3-pronged approach. Trinity's self-assessment framework covers 100% of farmers digitally for easier quality assessment. Our new innovations have further helped farmers. Ballotronics is a technologically advanced tea leaf reader that uses AI to categorize tea leaves into different grades. Solimet uses sensor systems and AI to provide hyper-local monitoring of the weather, soil and plants. Soliprobe meanwhile instantly tests the soil and measures a variety of vital factors. Policy advocacy. For the first time, small tea growers and registered tea gardens were brought under the Indian Tea Association's producer platform. Trinity was recognized by all participating countries of the Asia Tea Alliance. Due to traceability and consumer connection through Solitrace, businesses are paying a premium. Solitrace captures data points at every point of transaction in the tea supply chain. It connects consumers to monitor the supply base and builds trust through transparency. Our farm-to-cup concept is evidenced with the Darmona brand, where consumers scan the QR code on each tea bag to learn about the tea's origin and other processes in its production. Today, Trinity has managed to help 44% of growers that are part of the total SDGs. They benefit from lower costs, better soil health, more crops, and higher prices for their leaves. This resulted in crop production improvement by 12% and great reduction of GHG emission. recognized by the ICC Social Impact Summit and Award. Trinity is now preparing itself for the next phase. Here the program will cluster Trinity associated villages, bases, their production capacity and proximity. The Trinity program is a testament to a 360-degree approach to making tea farming sustainable for all and benefiting the small tea growers in the process. Many of Trinity-trained progressive farmers started producing specialty teas. 15 such growers, whose teas were adjudged by the Expert Tea Tasters, won awards during the India International Small Tea Growers Convention held in Kolkata in November 2022. This is just the start. We are sure that Trinity's sustainable approach will make a big difference in the industry in the years to come.
Yeah. It's the Trinity project, but I will show you a couple of other innovations.
Meet Ratan Roy, second.
Yeah, there we go. This Trinity platform communicates through all kinds of different devices. It's very advanced, but we also have devices that are less advanced, less technology advanced, but working really fine with farmers that are really in a remote area without any kind of internet coverage. We ask these farmers to participate in these data ecosystems by providing them incentives, and that works very well. And that's what I would like to show you in this next video. So let me optimize again for a video clip presentation, and there we go.
Zawadi is a reward program provided by Solidaridad and Kivuno. The program allows lead farmers and extension officers to register farmers and allows the farmers to collect or earn points that work like money. Check their point balance in the wallet, and once the points have accumulated, request to buy goods which can be delivered to them. So, how does it work? Step number 1, farmer registration. For you to start earning points, you need to be registered onto a Solidaridad program or a Kivuno service. Once you are registered, you'll receive a farmer ID. You only need one card, which gives you automatic access to the Zawadi program and other Solidaridad and Kivuno services. Once you have your ID card, you can start collecting Zawadi points. Step 2, collecting points. Solidaridad, Kivuno agents and the lead farmers have several apps to reward you with points. Make sure to present your farmer ID whenever you participate in a Kivuno or Solidaridad activity. Remember to always make sure that the agent, extension officer, or your lead farmer scans your ID so that you earn your points. You can also earn points when you keep records on Solidaridad apps, such as Business Solution and Farming Solution. Step 3, checking your wallet. Every time your ID is scanned and when you record your activity on Solidaridad apps, your points are added to your wallet in the Kivuno system. You get your own wallet when you get your farmer ID. If you have a phone of your own, you can check your points at any time through the Solidaridad WhatsApp platform called Wadi. If you don't have access to a phone, feel free to ask your lead farmers to check your points using your farmers group's shared phone. All you have to do is add Wadi as a contact using the number on the screen. Once this is done, find the contact on WhatsApp and text hi. Wait for a response, then reply with the number 5 and follow the prompts. Step 4, buying goods. Once you have collected enough points, you can buy goods such as gumboots, protective clothes, sprayers, phones, and many different types of inputs. You can get the latest catalog showing a variety of goods that you can buy on the WhatsApp platform. You can use WhatsApp to buy the goods. To start the buying process, select Redeem Points under the Zawadi option on the WhatsApp platform and follow the prompts. Once the order is placed, the local Kivuno office will arrange to deliver goods to you. To minimize delivery costs, the Kivuno agents combine all the orders from a farming group and deliver the goods once a month. Step 5, collecting your goods. To collect your goods, go to the meeting point with your farmer ID. The agent will then scan your farmer's ID and then give you your goods. By doing this, the Kivuno agent will take points out of your wallet in exchange for the goods. You can continue collecting more points. There is no limit to the number of times a farmer earns points or the number of times you buy goods with your points. Zawadi is a gift to good farmers. In the Zawadi program, the lead farmers, Solidaridad and Kivuno are all gift bearers. Zawadi, good gifts, chipo chakanaka, mpeto zabwino.
Yeah, and this is reality, and we are very proud of that. It's a very simple device. It's built on WhatsApp. Most of these farmers are, quite familiar using it. And if they don't have a phone, they share the phone that we supply that we provide to the community. And each farmer has an identity and can collect points, when sharing data. And this is how we pull and not push farmers into the data ecosystem. Now, why am I showing this? This is a way, actually, the more farmers are part of this data platform and are connected to the data ecosystem, the better they will be able to comply with upcoming regulations, because we have their profile and all the data registers in the platform, and we have devices in the field that can easily update the information on request. And that's why I think this is interesting.
Zawadi is a reward program. Zawadi is a reward program.
This is another part of Zawadi, where we actually provide climate risk indications to farmers, where we actually give advice how to become resilient. One of the major strategical goals of Solidaridad is to build resilient farm systems. That means that farmers that can cope with the changing weather patterns as a cause of climate change. Now, when a farmer gives us information, we do a risk scan on their pathway to climate mitigation and adaptation. And we actually give them advice to apply a couple of farm practices. If they file that in the system, they'll get the reward points. And this is how we get a lot of information from quite a lot of farmers. As you can see here, we just started, but still, 30,000 farmers are being registered. There are about 420 fields that are completing that. There are a lot of activities to date. And that means, all kinds of practices that are being filed. So this is actually the proof of concept that we're able to collect data from even the most remote farm. But this is the final slide I will show you. I will keep this very short because it's a quite complex one. But this is a project that we launched last year to connect farmers immediately and directly to carbon markets. It means that we ask farmers to plant trees on their plots, and the trees, they capture CO2, they capture emissions. And we verify that capture of emissions through satellite information. Combination between our data in the field combined with the satellite data that we get, the verification of CO2, actually gives us enough data to do a proper verification and a proper certification. And the certification applies to the carbon credits. So from the data, from the trees, the carbon emissions, the carbon credits, we offer those credits on the market. And here, through that market that the Rabobank established, parties or organizations like Microsoft are currently buying those credits, paying for it, and that payment goes automatically in the wallet of the farmer through the same platform where the data is being collected. It's quite sophisticated. We're testing it out. There are a lot of issues and challenges, of course. But if you want to talk about challenges, I'm really curious to hear from the audience what they think the challenges are of this Fair Data initiative, including all the applications that we are launching.
Thanks, Frederik. Yes, we would like to move into a section indeed talking about the challenges, but also opportunities. I would like to actually ask you for a kind of, let's say in some ways, a summary question, because in your presentation, you gave some really nice examples of the possible business cases that can generate income for farmers. So the carbon credit, last one you mentioned, is certainly one of the additional income where smallholder farmers can potentially benefit from this needed massive investment. As in the beginning we started, when the whole world need to reduce 50% carbon, there's going to be a lot of investment and incurred. So how much that benefit investment will actually be able to benefit or increase the income of farmers? What do you think? Because we see there's some we can talk about the general benefit, but at some point we needed to come down to specific targets. So in your sheet, let's say farmers currently get less than 3% retail price, for example, for tea, for coffee, for cocoa. So with this 7 data business cases, what do you think as an economist and a banker, if we have to put a number on the price of each farmers can expect from the data business case, what do you think should be a realistic scenario that their income can be improved and then let's say counterbalancing their disproportionate share in this climate burden?
Yeah, that's a good question. And we've done that analysis, of course. For sure, we did that with the carbon markets. With the current price on this carbon market of $20 per ton CO2, 80% of that price, so that $16 goes directly to the farmer. And that would mean on a yearly basis an increase of approximately 10-15%, let's say more 15% addition to their current income. If that price goes up, and actually, current carbon prices in certain markets go up to, let's say, 60, 70, even $90, you can imagine what that would mean for the income of the farmer, of course, because still we try to achieve that 80% of that income goes to the farmer. We're currently working with the Maastricht University and a couple of other universities to build that case, to get some endorsement about that, because what we really need is also third parties to actually verify our calculations. So that's actually what we're going to do, what we actually do now. The other example is tracking and tracing that we do with a couple of projects, where we track and trace cocoa from field to, let's say, a bar in the shop, and where we actually now have a couple of off-takers that pay a quality premium and a data premium on top of the price that the farmer can get. And the data premium plus the quality premium. The quality premium relates to the story that we can tell, because the place of origination is clear, but also the farm story, including the pictures of the farm. That's the quality of the product, the experience of the product in terms of quality. Both quality and data premium will add around 10% on the income on the price that the farmers get. Will that alleviate farmers out of poverty? I mean, that's the big question. Is that enough to get them out of poverty? Answer, no. It's not enough, but it helps. What really would help is that, prices go up. Also that the farm systems become more economical viable. Some farms are too small at this moment. And on such a small plot, they can never become economically viable. That's an important one. And the third one is, of course, also subsidies. Our European farming system is, I'm afraid to say that, is built on subsidies. There are a lot of subsidies involved in farming. So also the government plays an important role in stimulating, farm systems in their country. So it's not the solution, but it really helps farmers to adhere to sustainability practices. Yeah.
Thanks. That's a very understandable number, because that makes the business case also clear. If we have a specific income target, we can actually translate this carbon data into, let's say, per tree, 50 cents per tree, for example. That will be a very sizable business opportunities for companies and players along the chain. So let's also open up the floor for also other questions, but we'll start with our poll question of what do you think about is the biggest challenge for the Fair Data Initiative presented by Frederick. Several choices. The first one is the interoperability mess, which summarizes the current situation relating to data standards or standards, government requirements. There's still the hybrid between voluntary and the mandatory requirements. Second is whether to get a critical mass of companies to adopt. So Solidaridad is working, you mentioned you're working with palm oil relating to consumer goods. So certain big companies like Henkel or soy. So, but then the entire supply chain, for example, with, we have also in our, today, I think Aldi, Albert Heijn of the world and Unilever's, are they joining this? Is there enough critical mass to adopt the standard? And then the third one is what you also mentioned, it's imbalanced power dynamics between farmers and big corporations, whether that is still, that can guarantee this data transparency and equal distribution of price. And the last one is to actually collecting data in the field. So please just use this question as kind of opening for you to raise your questions, comments based on the areas that you are working on. So what do you think, Pedro? Let's come to you first. What do you think with these 4 choices to choose one, or can be other? You already mentioned a number of challenges, but what do you think is the biggest issue you need to solve to upscale this fair data initiative?
Yeah, so Tiffany, there are more challenges and several apply, I think. But what we're currently working on is the cost of collecting data in the field, which is at this moment extremely high. That's why it is a case for NGOs and CSOs to work on. And that's why we should be very happy that there are donors, because otherwise it would never be, it would never happen. The cost of collecting a data profile ranges between let's say $3 for a very simple profile, up till $20 for a very complex profile. I quite recently heard from one of the staff members, $100 for a profile. That sounded very much too much, but you know, it tells us that there's a lot of insecurity in the cost price of collecting that data. So that's I think one. How can we lower that? So we can lower that through technology. So imagine that a farmer has a direct access to the data platform and can upload its own data. So then it becomes really, really affordable. But also when different organizations start to share data related to a specific farmers. Currently, we are working on a use case with Syngenta and the Rabobank, where we share information on a group of farmers in Uganda producing coffee. And in that way, we allow ourselves to verify the data in a very efficient way, but also to enrich the profile by sharing that data. Now, in this case, we had a good agreement with Syngenta and with the Rabobank. It was a small case, you know, it was not that sensitive. But if you start, you know, talking to Olam or Cargill or a couple of brands, you see, you guys want to share that data because at the end we will get better. They will not do that because it's been seen as a competitive advantage, and I can see that point. But it really hinders and blocks, you know, the sharing of data and lowering the cost price of a data profile. Yeah, who owns the data is a question that comes in. According to our principles, Nelleke, the farmer owns the data. And that means that you want to ask the farmer for consent using the data in a specific way. But you don't want, Tiffany, to send the farmer every hour an SMS like, can we use it for this? Can we use it for that? And how do we actually optimize this whole process of reaching consent with the farmer? And how can we make sure that it is not just consent, but it is informed consent, that the farmer has a good understanding about the implications? So this is also, I think, quite a challenge, how to organize this. And when is it good or satisfying for us to work with? That's also, where do we put the bar to also make sure that it is practicable? Yeah, so these are a couple of challenges that we're currently working on.
Thanks, Frederick. So for audience, you are welcome. Just raise your hands for comments. And then actually, I would like to invite some of our participants. I'm very happy to see from Global Gap, for example. That will be one of the organizations, I would imagine that actually in our previous session, there was already expressed interest for organizations like Solidaridad, Global Gap, GS1 to work together to share data, to work on this interoperability issues, but also the user profile. And also I see Tiffany Do, also another Tiffany. She's working in Nepal, building apps to collect, actually working with local farmers, as will be really on the ground collecting data. So I would like to hear your comments for on the ground. How do we see the cooperation between organizations and also reducing the cost and hindrance in terms of data collection? So please, I will call on you, or you are welcome to raise your hand. Tiffany, are you still there? Would you like to join us? You can switch on your camera.
Very nice to see you again. Thank you for this really wonderful presentation. And I joined because I was specifically interested in that issue. How do we use technology to connect the farmers to kind of the larger buyers, and how can they benefit from it? So as Tiffany mentioned, our startup, we're a fintech startup, and we help finance journey monitoring. So whether that is loans to farmers, payments to farmers, or even repayments of loans, we're able to use SMS technology so that all farmers can participate. So one thing that we're really exploring right now is how can we work with specific value chains and bringing payments such as carbon credits, and be able to directly have that using the technology directly to give it to the farmers, so that ensuring the price transparency can start from the very lowest levels. So we'd love to talk more and see if there's any possibility of working together.
Frederick, do you like to respond to comments?
Yeah, love to work with you guys too. We made a decision 7 years ago. It was quite a bold decision, Tiffany, to actually develop the applications ourselves, also the platforms and everything, not outsourced, but insourced. And that's quite it was a difficult decision at the time, because we knew that there were a lot of applications available, even more professional, with a lot more organizational backup. But we managed to actually set up 3 IT teams, one in Bangalore, 7, 8, 9 people big, one in South Africa, 5, 6 people big, and one in South America, that are actually building those applications. But they are always interested to see if we can integrate one of the applications in such a way that it becomes feasible for our farmers to actually participate on platforms. Because I think that's the added value from our side. That's the USP, you may call it USP. Our USP is that we have such a true understanding of the situation of a smallholder, and we have the trusted relationship, that we know exactly what to do, how to connect him or her to that data ecosystem.
Thanks, Frederick. Very, very nice to see the connection. I see you're already working in India. So indeed, in India and Nepal, that can have it's a quite easy connection to make. So hopefully something comes out of this. I see Gerrit Brummelman. You are the sector coordinator for ruminant dairy farmers. Would you like have some questions? Please, feel free to share.
I'm the sector coordinator for the ruminants in PUM, and I just had a meeting with the Zimbabwean farmers organization, and they come with a big request. How can you help us to collect data and to use it for the farmers? And I've been in India in February, and there I met Solidaridad, and we discussed how we can work together, and then we discussed about the possibility from Solidaridad and PUM to work together, especially for the small farmers, small dairy farmers in the villages, and their data might be a possibility. So my question was, how does this system already work with, for a dairy farm? Because you are only talking about crops like tea and coffee and so on, and what are the possibilities for dairy farming?
It's a very good question. We are, in terms of our project portfolio not that big in dairy. I have to say that first. Our origin lies in the commodity chains that are international, and a dairy commodity chain is most likely is locally. So that explains why dairy is not a big part of our portfolio. And that also explains that we only have a few applications that we developed for dairy. I know there is one application we developed in India for dairy farmers, especially for female dairy farmers. And there's one that we call the cattle grazing app. It's not really for dairy, but it's for beef. Might come close to that, and we developed that in South Africa. And those are the two applications from the back of my mind that we developed for the dairy sector. We have most projects on dairy are in Tanzania and Kenya at this moment. That's also where we made some investments 2-3 years ago in Tanzania in a dairy milk collection centers. Actually, we linked those milk collection centers to a factory, a dairy factory, and there we actually also collecting some data. But I'm not sure that we use IT tools over there to collect it straight from the field. Yeah, so long answer, we don't have so much outreach in dairy sector. And I think India and South Africa are the way to go. There we have some experience in this commodity. Thanks, Gerrit.
Thanks, Gerrit. Yeah, earlier we had the comment from Nelleke Veenstra. I think you work for Triodos Bank from the banking, sustainable banking side. Would you like to share some of your comments or what you learned from today, and any questions? I don't know if Nelleke is still here with us. Oh, okay, so she will join us in a bit, or we can have to go to separate room. Georgia Fompiri, you give the comment also earlier about the financing. You're welcome to share with us.
Yes, hello Tiffany, can you hear me?
I can hear you. You're welcome to turn on your mic, your camera if you want. Just
a sec. Can you see me now?
We can hear you well.
Okay.
Yeah, we can hear you, see you also. Yeah, hi.
Thanks for the nice presentations and the comments. It was really, for me, it was a really eye-opening, the first question you started, Tiffany, about being pessimistic and optimistic. And I think we want to be really pessimistic, but working on the field and dealing with the challenges you see, it makes you to become realistic, I would say, not pessimistic. Now, regarding my comment on the finance, we have already seen, I mean, during the last 5 years, more and more, the sustainability let's say agreements, alignments that the banks are already starting to ask from their clients, and clients like farmers are more and more present. For a large corporation to be sustainable, to have people to work on this on this side, to have proof of concept and to align with the SDGs, it's not such a big deal. But having worked with SMEs and even smaller companies and farmers, for them every euro, every money really matters. So a lot of smaller companies and farmers, they really don't afford to become sustainable by proof. Don't afford to have experts like you, like me, like other people we have here to do the research, to do the report, to do the reporting and everything. So this is a controversial thing for me, because we all know that a lot of these small and medium-sized farmers are banks' clients, main clients. So I'm really curious how Nelleke is going to highlight this upcoming problem, the financing, because we don't want to to have, you know, only big clients, big players on the field. We really want to keep all those smaller and medium-sized farmers alive and have a future-proof business.
Yeah, and that's not only, and it's definitely not only from an idealistic point of view, Georgia, but also from the viewpoint that these small-scale farmers provide quite a lot of the volume of food that we are actually eating on our plate. And that's why the activities that we are doing in the field matter so much. We do it for free because this is development aid. This is what works for us and for the farmers, but it is not sustainable, of course, in the end. We need to go to a situation where when farmers must comply to these regulations, that they have that money to do the investments and to comply, and that they have access to finance for that. So that's that's the remark you're making, and I think it's a real relevant one. We work on two ends actually. We try to onboard these farmers as easy as we can, without any cost, and them being part of that ecosystem and data economy. It does not cost them so much. It only costs them time to update their data on that platform, because it's a very efficient process. Can even continue after a project has stopped. So we also monitor our interventions after the project period ends. And what we do see in the field is that when the farmers work with the Zoardi, for instance, where they get immediate rewards, these rewards are being paid by companies that actually buy the produce from the farmers. So we have a business case over there. We see that that business case still holds on after the project period. So what we're trying to do is build that business case, like I showed you, these 7 business cases, in such a way that the farmer can benefit from it. I think that access to finance is a different issue also to talk about. We can talk about quite long and intensively. It is one of the biggest issues that we see currently in the field, that it's very hard for farmers to get access to finance. Short-term finance is doable for quite a lot of farmers. It depends actually, you know, what kind of commodities they work in, but most of the time it's okay. But long-term finance to make deep investments in their farm, to professionalize, is in the current situation very difficult to tap into.
May I ask something last, Tiffany?
Yes, please.
Yeah, to all of you, but especially to Frederick, you referred in the beginning of your presentation that we always have the consumer on our mind. I mean, it's a consumer-driven approach. And of course, it's really relevant for the consumer not to end up in a market where you have a monopoly of the big clients. You as a consumer, we also want to have the smaller players on the field. Is it an idea that all this credit-driven, reward-driven approach to apply it also from a consumer-driven side, for instance, to have the platforms also to be used from the consumers in order to be rewarded from the choices. So to get, if you choose a product that is coming from a small SME or a small farmer, to get some rewards to be used also in this idea. So to have a both ways reward pool strategy.
Yes, I think that is currently doable and achievable in niche markets where you have specialty products.
Okay.
You can actually link the bar that you buy. And in the United States, the cost price or the price of that bar is about $20. I'm not kidding you. This is high quality cocoa, $20 for one bar. We sell it under our name in America in a couple of shops. Here, the consumer has all the information about the farm, the people, he, she, the farmer, the price, full transparency in everything. And here we connect the consumer actually directly to the farmer. But still, we have a physical product, and that physical product has to run through channels that have been in place for hundreds of years sometimes. So, and with that power of the big companies that are in between, and I showed you that slide, it's very hard to break that power, because it's not the interest of Olam or the large brands when consumers directly connect to the source of origin, because then they skip the whole supply chain. So it's for the mass markets, for big commodities like cocoa, that you have a lot of kind of different food, palm oil, even better example, or soy, it's really difficult.
I would like to ask Nelleke, you are from the banking sector, so from a bank that specializes in impact investments. I would like to hear your comments on the issue of data, business user cases. How are you as one of the banking sector involved in this?
Yeah, I really want to see it from an optimistic point of view, because that's the only way to look at it. And I share many of the concerns that Frederick mentioned. But from an optimistic point of view, I say, I hope that all these efforts that are currently being put into this lead to some sort of joint standards, because what worries me at the current stage is that there are many efforts, and there are also many initiatives and many mandatory initiatives. There's also such thing as the SFDR, Sustainable Finance Disclosure Regulations, which means that banks and investment vehicles such as Triodos have to comply with regulations that show that our investments are following sustainability rules. So my fear right now is that we are all overburdening these smallholder farmers with questions for data, and are somehow unable to collect them on one platform and unable for everyone to have access to this platform, which would be ideal in the end. And at the same time, it is also very complicated, because that's the question I asked her: who owns these data in the end? And who's going to do what with it? And I totally agree with Frederick mentioning the Olams and the Cargills of this world with increasing power, and access to data is also increased power. That to me is the biggest challenge. There's this whole huge desire for assembling data, a lot of good efforts going on, and I think Solidaridad is doing an excellent job on that. And where is it going to lead to? So yeah, these are exciting times, and sometimes also worrying times. I think that's the best I can say.
Thanks for sharing your thoughts. But on your note, that reminded me, Anushka, let's see the last poll question result indeed. Because I think Nelleke probably pointing to seeing the imbalanced power dynamics being the biggest challenge, right? Am I correct? And yes, so that actually a lot of indeed shared by many of people here, that's seen as a bigger challenge than the collection, Frederick.
Yes, it is a challenge. It's a challenge that has implications not on the data side, but with a lot of things like pricing, quality requirements, etc. It's also a challenge that cannot be solved through the market, because this imbalance of power is being produced by the same market, and then it's really difficult to dissolve that. Can only be solved, I think, through mandatory regulations at the end. To actually give more market guidance on this matter. Now, Nelleke, you have a good point that at the end, you don't want to bother the farmer every time that he or she is in the field. He or she has to give all his attention to producing cocoa or tea, and not producing data for multiple stakeholders who want to have that data. Now, it starts with agreeing on a unique farmer ID, on an ID that all these organizations that want to adhere to that same policy or principle use. Because with the same ID, you make sure that your applications and data become interoperable. then you can start exchanging data. So that's from a technical point of view, one of the most important things that we need to achieve. There are initiatives like GS1 and the DIASCA initiative from GIZ that are actually working on this with a larger group of stakeholders. But we, within Solidaridad, we're also working on it. We have millions of farmers in our portfolio. And we also try to agree on one specific farmer ID. And now I'm going to tell you a secret, Nelleke. Even in our organization, we have difficulties to really agree upon one farmer ID, to explain to you how difficult it is, how really difficult that is. But that's one of what first thing. The second thing, what we need to agree on is what is pre-competitive and what is competitive data. We really have to agree on that with stakeholders, because if we carve out the pre-competitive domain, then organizations are much more comfortable sharing that data without asking money for it or all kind of other things asking for it. So that is the second thing we need to do. The third thing we need to do is to acknowledge farmer-centric governance. There's a good publication by Bill and Melinda Gates, sponsored by Bill and Melinda Gates, about this. How can you make sure it is a farmer-centric way of governance? And that starts with the ownership of the data, in which we believe that ownership should be in the hands of the farmer. That's from a technical point of view, that's doable, but the implications are quite challenging. How are we going to ask for permissions, consent? When is it informed consent? When is it just, we don't want this to be a check, tick the box exercise, if you know what I mean. So that brings challenges on its own. And the fourth element that we think is important, that farmers should not be pushed into a data ecosystem, but pulled into the data ecosystem, so that they benefit from sharing data and are not, a victim that, shares the data without anything getting back. Yeah.
We can still have a few more comments. I'd like to also ask Anna Bransma, and then after that, Nico. Anna, you are, I understand, a founder of a Farm Hack, which is a data-driven Dutch startup. I think it's data fair policy is now also at the center of the Dutch policy landscape for farmers, especially. So I also like to hear your question, but also your thinking about the user cases and the farm data in the Netherlands, or what you are familiar with.
Yeah, I think that Frederik just dove into a couple of important elements. And there's indeed this difference. Farm Hack is quite focused on the Dutch situation and Dutch farmers. And it's a very rich data ecosystem with already, let's say, pre-existing agreements and protocols and pipelines through which data already flows. And it's very difficult to make adjustments to that situation. So I'm quite curious to dive into those differences a little bit more. But the challenges are similar. Like, how can we make sure that farmers get their fair share of the value that's created with data? And there's this tension, in a sense, that you can actually share data as often as you please, as you wish. And that's interesting because you can create value over and over again. But if we do not somehow have the governance in place that every time this leads to some fair share to the farmer, it's other parties that are benefiting. And this extraction model is is something that we know in food and agriculture. This is how a lot of the value that's being created is being extracted from the farm level. So how do we do this differently this time around on the data part? And it's really difficult. And I'm really interested in the statements that Frederik is making. So there's this a really elaborate and smart effort to try and do this wisely and do it farmer-centric and have the governance in place and try and take a lead on the technical side to develop your own types of technology, which is, these are smart strategic decisions, I think. Maybe as a last remark, I think that in the Netherlands, a lot of our ag innovation in IT is being funded by the government. So there's a very strong, let's say, fundamental research dimension to the type of IT that we are producing or developing. And yeah, it's very tech driven. And so there's a commercial drive to develop data-driven solutions, and there's a little bit of a lack of let's say, a demand for technologies by farmers. So this has been something that's been in our focus, that we feel that we will get to better types of technology when this demand for technology is being articulated, and farmers need support and help to become to take up that role. So not a passive consumer user, but an active driver of technology or tech-driven innovation. Yeah. So.
Thanks, Anna. Frederick, great comment.
Yeah, I will do that after you harvested another question, because I have to plug in some energy in my PC. So if you hold on for 10 seconds, and I'm back again.
Well, and I think while we're waiting, maybe Nico, you can also share your comments, and we can then ask Frederick to comment at the same time.
Yes, and thank you. Yes, I'm Nico of AgriPlace. We are a Dutch company helping farmers to collect all the data for certification in fruit and vegetables, but also in arable farming. But certainly not for smallholder farmers at the moment. And we have a lot of traders and retailers in more than 17 countries now that collect all the data in the international supply chains for fruit and vegetables. My question for Frederick is, years ago when I started with this platform, it was also my passion to help the smallholder farmers. And I was even in Ghana and at the office of Solidaridad and visited some cooperatives in cocoa. My idea at that moment was, but we never got that far, I must admit, that if a cooperative with 10,000 cocoa farmers could collect their own data, that this data set would have value for the Nestlé's and the Mars of this world, and that technology should make it possible to also evaluate this data, because now all the traders buying or collecting all the data, when the cooperative gets another client, then again, that company is collecting all the data again. So it should be much more effective if, and that's all what you presented today, if you have a platform where the data is, so that there is a value, and then they can also better choose. They can also sell their data and their produce to, let's say, smaller companies in the world. They are more. Why doesn't that happen? I mean, you have so much experience, because you would think there is a business case for a cooperative if they have their own data and own their data, that should give them an enormous freedom and opportunity to trade in the markets. Why doesn't it happen?
Yeah, that doesn't happen because of the cost price of collecting data. So what I explained, this cost price ranges between $3 and $20 per profile. So imagine that we support a cooperative. You don't have so much cooperatives, by the way, in Ghana, but if we would do that in Côte d'Ivoire, for instance, same example, and you have, let's say, 10,000 farmers, and you multiply it by 20, that's a 200,000 carve out of a budget.
Yeah.
Now, usually the carve out for IT in budgets that are financed by donors is 10-15%. So we're looking at a project times 10, which is 2 million.
Yeah.
And that means that the way we operate as an NGO, and all the NGOs operate, is from a project to project, scaling, and that does not scale up so quickly. So it took us, I think, 5 to 8 years to have 120,000 farmers, cocoa farmers, now in our database, including all the data that we need to have. But then the question is, how do we update these data?
Yeah.
Because you don't want to go into the field every year, because the update will cost you around $10, for instance. And who's going to finance that? So we need to go to some kind of a model where we can actually collect that data in a very cheap way. Now, that requires technology, but also requires the willingness to share data, to verify data, to do this together with stakeholders in this whole cocoa system. Now, when we talk to Olam, for instance, about data sharing, they don't share data. They don't. So they're just caring for their own farmers that are connected to their supply chain, but they're not going to share the data. No way. And that does not help.
No, but can you imagine that if you have a long-term relationship between a brand that buys a certain commodity and the suppliers and the producers themselves, if you have really a long-term relationship of 5 or 10 years contract, then that company could be interested to invest in collecting the data because they need it. I'm sure you have tried that within your PPOs, but you don't believe that that will give enough scale to solve the problem.
I do believe it can, but we need to become clear about we need to be able to carve out those data points that are pre-competitive. We need to agree in the sector on pre-competitive data versus competitive data.
Yeah.
And these two kinds of data, they have different mechanisms to deal with. But I think that's one of the things that are needed most at this point of time. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Peter, do you have still some response to Anna's question in comparing the business case in the Netherlands, which is not the development aid arena, let's say, it's more driven, it's a lot of technology, a lot of data already, but still you face same challenges. How would you see this comparison?
Yeah, I think from a fundamentally point of view, I agree with Anna. There are some fundamental questions like uniform farmer ID, that we can share. I think pre-competitive versus competitive data is also a point. Farmers in the Netherlands are much better organized, so they can organize themselves much easier around the platform. They are well able to connect to platforms. So there are a couple of, direct advantages for Dutch farmers to actually start sharing data. There are some good examples, I believe, where farmers actually start sharing their data. They got a lot of data back from the applications that they use. Those applications use the data that they get from the farmers. But at the end, there's always a business model behind those kind of applications that actually, extract that data from farmers, offering some services back, but probably not always in a balanced way. And that also is similar to the issues that we see in the field. So I do agree on a couple of fundamental issues that Anna is flagging. I think they're really relevant. The only issue that we face with is the issue that we're trying to onboard farmers that are digitally completely illiterate and don't have the technology to immediately interact with the platform that we have.
Thank you, Frederik, for very detailed and honest, open, in-depth discussion. We are at the end of our session today. I can invite one last concluding question, burning remark, if there's any. Dick, you will normally give the last word. You have to switch on your microphone. We don't hear you. See you try to talk. Okay, well, next time then. So if there's no other questions, I would like to thank everybody for joining and for the great comments and discussions. One last comment from Anna, so you can still read that from Don't Collect Much Data and Turn into Management. Okay, so in that sense, there are still some similarities in terms of the data business case for farmers. I think that's whether developing countries or developed countries remain a big issue. How do you see the benefit from that? That probably can be a case to work together and learn from technology or regulatory point of view. We'll have our next session end of April to talk about Let's Grow, which is a data collection platform for improving crop quality in horticulture sector and join that to application in the bigger open field. So welcome everybody who's joining in a month, and thank you very much and have a good afternoon.